Welcome, Mr. Iftikhar, to That Talks. Today, we would like to discuss water scheme restoration with you. So we'll delve into it. And our first question for you is if you could briefly describe the story of water scheme restoration. Where did you do this work and how did you do it?
Okay, thank you for inviting. It's such a pleasure to be with you and sharing my work and my interest in water management. So, what I've been doing, I've been studying Changa Pani, program by Nazir Ahmed Wattu that he has been implementing at different places and cities in Pakistan. The very recent one on which I actually worked more and I did a paper as well. This was done on in Balwal. So Balwal is a small city. It's one of the subdivision of Sargodha, and there was usually the way the schemes happen, water schemes, and the government started a scheme in one of the sort of a few UCs rather, I think, few union councils in Balwal city. But after some time, it was still not complete. And then the contractor who was working on this project, he also, disbanded that project. And then, people of Balwal were not getting quality water. And this is also important to understand the groundwater is actually brackish in that area. So it's really hard for people just to have their own, pumps, water pumps as well. So what was happening that people were bringing water from they were purchasing water from very unhygienic sort of transportation means and, gallons that those people were using on donkey carts. So this was what happening. And then this Changa Pani program came in. They worked with the people and the government. They restored that scheme. And the model that they adopted, it was community government partnership. So the idea was that government alone or communities alone can't work, and they need to distribute work, responsibilities, finances, and then people need to be empowered to run that scheme. So that's the Changa Pani Balwal on which I wrote paper.
So I just to put things in perspective, there are two things I want to say at the outset. One, the importance of talking about this topic is that we know that there are various levels and ways where underperformance takes place. One is under allocation of budget. Most of the right-based NGOs, they always keep talking about underspending. But the other is underperformance, that government, after it has spent millions of dollars, most of the services cannot be accessed by the people. There are thousands of dysfunctioning water supply schemes, sanitation schemes, health clinics, schools. And it fails because citizens, they don't take responsibility and they don't realize their power, that how without lending power to the government, they can make government powerful. And this sunk investment, they can restore it and bring it back to life. So that is one thing in terms of perspective, it is very important to know. And the reason we want to talk to you is because when Nazir Wattu started work in this area, he summed up his approach by saying water management is water measurement. Traditionally, right-based NGOs also oppose communities paying for the water service they received. So one is they focus on budget allocation and they ignore the lost budget which has already been spent. And second is they think that measurement and payment for water hurts the poor, whereas Wattu believe that it helps them. So could you tell us briefly when they discovered that the water scheme in Balwal was dysfunctional, how did Mr. Nazir Wattu kickstart the process? What happened?
Okay, so I think you've highlighted very important points, and that's what my experience tells that, thousands of schemes are dysfunctional, and the political economy of water that revolves around initiating new schemes. there is relatively less appetite in making dysfunctional schemes functional, and the more appetite for starting a new scheme, because every new project that brings new incentives for contractors, for the local people, and it also helps them win votes actually. So this is something important, because the government sometimes has developed infrastructure, but it's very difficult for them to maintain the infrastructure. And that's not only in the case of water. You can see it in the case of solid waste management. You can see in the case of water treatment. You can see it in the case of many other infrastructure projects. And the same was happening in Balwal, because they had infrastructure, they had tube well, they had major infrastructure of water, but still scheme wasn't working. So the process that happened, that people of Balwal approached Wattu Saab, and Wattu Saab then visited Balwal. He reviewed the system, looked at water pipes, and he discussed the situation. And what he found out that even the pipes are of low quality, and many of the infrastructure that was laid out actually that needs to be changed. So this is also, it tells us the lesson of transparency and accountability. When the government is working as a solo flight, sort of not taking into account the perspective of communities, not engaging them, then really there is no way to hold the quality of even infrastructure. So Wattu Saab then started, meeting local people and discussing with them their ideas about water supply, how they are suffering without water. And then sometimes he even had to do mobilization to tell them the importance of clean drinking water. Because we often think people sitting in academic positions, or some right-based NGOs, or some people associated with scholarship, we think that everyone knows importance of clean water, but that's not the case. If I see in Pakistan, maybe 70-80% of people in this country don't even know the importance of clean water. So Wattu's job major is to mobilize people and enhance their understanding. The first task that he does is actually the mobilization relating to improving their knowledge about the quality of water and its importance. The second thing that he does is actually he tells them, okay, if you want to wait for the government to do something for you, you can wait for many years, because there has been many budgets and many projects, and you guys are still not having quality water. So the one way is that we continue waiting for the government, and the other way is let's develop some partnership with the government and develop a coalition that we can work on these ideas. So that's how mobilization happens. And then the third step he has to do is to tell them that water needs to be measured. Water should be rightly priced. And then this is a shared resource. We cannot have unlimited water for our wastage, for our many other aspects. So these are 3-4 areas where he really has to struggle. And after that struggle, then it becomes easier when people are with him, then people really want to do it. Then he negotiated with the municipal government, with the local governments, with the deputy commissioner, with the assistant commissioner, with TMA, Tehsil Municipal Administration. And then he finally reached out an agreement with them. Okay, whatever major infrastructure you guys have laid, you don't need to invest more. You have tube well. And what I'll do, I'll raise money from people for water meters and for smaller pipes, which he needed to lay down in the small streets actually. So the major big pipes were laid down by the government, but then smaller pipes, and then door-to-door connections, water meters, those needed to be provided through the money raised by Wattu from the people. So they reached out that agreement, and this becomes like 20 to 30% of cost that the people shared actually in that process.
Can I come back to one other thing? Because the purpose of this is to make the conceptual thinking behind this understandable to the people who are watching this. I think one thing which has not been stated explicitly is the component sharing approach, which provides a foundation for cooperation between the community and the government. on what basis they should cooperate. And component sharing means that internal development is responsibility of the community and external development is responsibility of the government. So here, internal development meant that looking after the distribution lines and seeing where they are choked, where they are leaking, where they need to be repaired, and also installing meters at every house and paying the bills for the meter based on the meter. And the advantage they had was because earlier there was a flat rate, and people who were making extravagant use of water, wasting water, washing their cars, or doing other things, they paid the same thing compared to the people who had very small amount of water consumed. So component sharing was behind this. And second part, as I understand, was that Vattu initiated dialogue with three parties: community, door-to-door contact, and receiving their consent for installing meters with the government, but also he chased the contractor who had done faulty work. That if you don't replace these lines and you don't complete your work which you left unfinished, will not spare you, will go after you. So I thought it should be brought to the fore.
That's wonderful, and I think you've highlighted quite important aspects. And just when we talk about component sharing, it looks like a very mundane sort of thing, but it's actually not mundane. It's very important, and as earlier mentioned, that it's more about a framework of sharing of finances, roles, and responsibilities. And when I was doing this work, reviewing this model of Changa Pani, at the same time I was studying Eleanor Ostrom's work in Nepal on irrigation systems and how irrigation channels were laid down or developed by the government. Then local people have had their own system of distributing water. So when it is left either to the government or the communities, and then it can't work. So this is where it comes on the scholarship of governing commons, where Eleanor Ostrom contributed. So I've cited that work in my paper as well, that if you see at a scholarship level, a conceptual level, so water is a shared resource. And when it is a shared resource and a collective resource, then it requires collective management. So that's the principle that is applied here in Changa Pani. And I also studied many water schemes in Sindh, particularly in Sakhar and Hyderabad. And I also found that, I tried to understand various models of participation. And what I came to know that where people were really involved in a water scheme, it performed relatively better than where people were not involved. And the reason is that when it brings more ownership, responsibility, and transparency. Just one example is if we see that you may have noticed across Pakistan during various governments, the public sector, installed these RO plants, these small plants where people can, get filtered water. But I think 99% are not functional because people were not involved at the installation stage. Sometimes we think, our NGOs think, we'll develop an infrastructure and we hand over to the community and our community will run. So my idea and my understanding based on this research has been it doesn't work. So you need to engage people and communities from very start at the design stage. It doesn't happen, if you've done everything, now you are actually, just transferring it.
Yeah, it's like Akhtar Hamid Khan used to say that when you are building a wall, he used to quote Sadi Shirazi, if the first brick is crooked, the whole wall will be crooked. If it has to be straight line, then you have to start from the beginning. So if you could walk us through how Vattu dealt with this step by step.
So particularly there are, as I mentioned to you, that the very first task that Vattu has to do is social mobilization. And through that social mobilization, the idea is we're engaging people. And then it also happens that when you are engaging with communities, then you also find people who are actually very vocal against what you are trying to do. And they are publicly opposing your work. They are saying that you are a lawyer, you are a thief, you are here only to earn money. So Vattu had to hear all these things. And because Vatu learned the social mobilization from Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan Sahab, and he said that he used to say that people who are actually openly opposing me, they become my friends eventually. And people who are just quiet, they won't be friend, they won't be my enemies. So Vatu's philosophy, and that was also borrowed from Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan Sahab, that if you've got enemies, then you are really doing something good. And that he also showed me that some of the people who initially opposed, later on, they actually became partners with him. So the first step is actually to crossing all these barriers with the community. The second step is obviously, is the government negotiation. Once you've done that, now the actual work starts. The third step, as you earlier mentioned, was actually the assessment of the quality of pipes, which were already laid down by the contractor. So when they started that process, then actually they had to negotiate with the contractor. And they also actually what they did actually, so they also went to that manufacturer and supplier who supplied those pipes to the contractor. And they also asked him, this will be a bad reputation for you if we also disclose that pipes you've been providing to the government, they are not up to the mark. And they also negotiated that deal with that supplier or manufacturer, and he also provided that water. The third or the fourth resistance that comes is actually the technical one, because Nazir Vatu is technically understands everything, but with every new locality, with every new region, there needs to be a new technical study. That what is the geography, what is the topography, and how to just manage that network of water. So that's where Vatu, with his long experience, he brings his own team. They analyze all these technical requirements. They hire labor. First, they design. Actually, that's again another lesson he has learned from Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan, is actually a proper census of the locality, because they need to know that how many households are there, what sort of households are there. They mark everyone, and they think if you do not know enough your neighborhood, then you cannot do such works. So they mark all these, households, try to understand the demography, try to understand the social and economic condition of people. And then the last, they need money now actually. And for money, now they need to collect the money in advance from people when even they are not getting water. So this is actually a tough job, because it takes some time, like you mentioned about the internal development. The internal development has to be done by financed by the people, financed by people. So what happens that then people actually resist, and now there is this real test of his mobilization work. If you just
And
walk in,
building trust with
building
the
trust
community.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where the real test comes in. And if he crosses that trust, or anyone crosses that trust, that people can trust in handing over money for that project, then it's actually the beginning of good days. So that's how it starts. And then this whole infrastructure management, and once this is done, then the last step is actually the maintenance, the critical step. And now you need to hire a team that needs to fix bugs in the system, that needs to fix repairs, maintenance. And then you need a team that is there to deliver bills, collect bills. And then again, a lot of resistance from influential people, because people are used to not paying water bills. Even I was, and sometimes I tell people that with all the state powers, with all the sort of monopoly of violence, our state remains unable to collect water bills, even if it is 300 rupees.
Yeah.
And nowhere in Pakistan, any city is collecting more than 30 to 35% of water bills. But in Nazir Vatu's case, Changa Pani case, this recovery is over 90%. So that's only with the persistence, with social mobilization, and with the trust. And then when people see the quality of service. But again, there are some influential people who won't like these things flourishing. And the last hurdle that usually comes in is to breaking that barrier in a way that where people are now with you. Even if some influential people trying to oppose you, but now you have a huge number of people standing with you because they've seen the service. So that's the overall process that I thought to share with you.
I want to point out something very interesting here, Dr. Naveed, because most of the time, as you said, NGOs or outsiders, when they go, instead of getting insights into real situation and knowing the things on ground and seeing where there are openings for their work. If they stereotype, they cannot succeed. And then they can blame the communities. Either communities are not responsive or the government is corrupt. But in this case, it was very interesting. The chief minister was personally committed that this program should succeed. And what you even told me that he had tears in his eyes at one time, as you said, that why these things cannot succeed. And the contractor was related to one of the members of National Assembly. That is how he got the contract. So on the one hand, the leader of the party at the province level, he wants it to succeed. And the local leader, he wants to, pick pockets and take away the money and hurt. So there is a conflict which creates an opening for Vattu, that he can go and put pressure and negotiate with them. So going there with open mind and looking for the openings and then making use of that, do you think it's a very important part of his methodology?
Yes, I think this is very important, and because you also compared with traditional quote unquote NGOs. So
Yeah,
what happens? Most of NGOs in Pakistan, unfortunately, they work as contractors actually.
yeah,
So they are getting funding from somewhere. Project is being designed, somewhere in another country, and then the local management, and so many tiers of hierarchy. And with that sort of disposed sort of ideology and some notion of, how projects work, they just try to impose it. So
yeah,
that's not the case with Vattu's approach. The Vattu's approach is we're understanding the local dynamics. And like you mentioned, that who is the contractor, knowing that
yeah,
his, affiliations, or
yeah,
what we economists often call this political economy analysis in a very naive way. But
yeah,
political economy of service delivery, where you need to understand the interests, motivations, associations, power, and sort of vested interest of everyone involved in that infrastructure, that becomes very interesting. And this is where how Vattu succeeds, is untangling all these sort of relationships, networks,
yeah.
association, and then devising the strategy. Because if
Again, yeah, bringing in Akhtar Hamid Khan's language for this, he said there are two approaches. When we were talking of NGOs, that is a template-based approach, where you come in with prefabricated ideas, designs, timelines, which we call so-called result-based management. The other is process-based approach, followed by Akhtar Hamid Khan and Vattu, where they follow the process of engagement, of looking for the opportunities, dealing with difference of opinion, and building trust based on the fact that development is a non-zero game. It is not zero-sum game. One
yeah.
party's loss is not other party's gain, but they all gain together. So I just wanted to state it because for the larger audience to understand this, that this is the basic difference between contractors and people like Vattu.
Yeah. So one thing important, the key lesson from this whole exercise is that if we want to improve the service delivery in the water sector, we need to engage local people, one. Second, we need to bring more transparency in this water system allocations, maintenance, and operations. The third thing that is very key, obviously, Nazir Vattu cannot go every city or a
Yeah,
neighborhood in Pakistan. Our idea is to understanding this scheme and how it can be, widely we can learn lesson from other locations. Again, this scaling up problem is also template based and checklist based. What we
exactly.
try to do that, okay, Nazir Vattu's model now apply across Pakistan. So I say, now you are going to do again the same mistake. What you need to learn from Nazir Vattu's lesson is engaging people. There can be different modes, there can be different ways to engage people. You do not need to necessarily do the way Vattu did it, but what
Yes.
you need to do is actually understand the local dynamics. And according to those dynamics, then you need to devise your partnership framework but build the key role by social entrepreneurs like Nazir Vatu.
Yeah,
And there
exactly.
needs to be having many social entrepreneurs, and we need to distinguish between these local grassroots level, organizations or non-profits or community organizations versus fancy NGOs. So this is
Again,
the lesson we need to learn.
yeah, I think Akhtar Hamid Khan also beautifully, again, what you're saying, he framed it. He says that you don't replicate programs, you replicate people.
Yeah.
So the first and most important challenge is to find people like Nazir Bhattu who want to do things not for immediate, narrow personal gains, but for the community. They think that community's welfare is personal enrichment for them. So you don't go with this template that now Vattu has to be replicated. Vattu's template has to be replicated. You have to find people, and this is another terminology which was used by people who worked on Samit Khan. This is called the principle of self-selection. You don't go and with your money or your power, you try to impose your template. You first ask people, do you want to make a change? Are you interested in solving this problem? Are you willing to learn? And then, as you said, you adapt it to the local situation. You see your own barriers and you learn how to cross those barriers. So I wanted to add this to make it.
I think that excellent. Your additions are wonderful. They are also bringing more clarity in my thinking as well. And I'll just share with you another example that another disciple of Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan Sahab is Hamidullah, Akhtar Hamid
Yes.
Memorial Trust,
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
working on waste management recycling. You
Right.
already interviewed him actually. So
Yeah.
wherever I go in Pakistan, I always give examples of these two people. Okay,
Right.
these are the two important aspects of our lives. One is water, another one is solid waste. How to address it? The government is unable to deliver services in any of these things, and the traditional model is not working. Let's think what else we can do. How can we improve? How can we engage people? So the key lesson here is the communities and government partnership. The key lesson here is the role of social entrepreneurs like Nazir Vatu. The key lesson here is openness of the government to just give space to such innovative solutions. So with these three things, I think we can see what sort of model works best in any scenario, and we can accordingly just sort of adapt to the situation.
Yeah. I want to make two short comments and then Manur will pick it up from there. R.F. Hassan beautifully summarized this. He said there are three actors: people, professionals, and politicians.
Bilkul.
People should identify the priorities, the need, if something is needed or not. Professionals should provide the technical feasibility. What are the various ways of doing it? Given the local resource endowment and local situation, as you said, topography and demography and all those things. And politicians or donors or providers, then their job is in response to this to come up with the resources, to get the best out of their resources. So we used to sum it as PPP. But okay. Yeah, but the last point, which is very important, is which I think our audience, especially the young people, need to know is that people who work on this program, who started as volunteer with Vattu, eventually the program generates resources to employ some of them also to continue doing this work, because without that it cannot be done. Initially, they found resources with the local government, then they found arrangements. So we have 6,000 union councils in Pakistan. So young people need to know, when we have so much unemployment, that in each union council we can employ at least 4 to 5 people to restore these programs and continue their maintenance and operation. So I just wanted to add these two things for people who are watching this. Please.
My question for you is, can you briefly go over the timeline? When were these water supplies schemes initially created? When did they started noticing problems? When did they become dysfunctional? Sort of that timeline, and then we'll talk about funding.
So So it started around 2010 sometime, I think. And then for 2 to 3 years, it took in developing infrastructure. And by 2012, I think the contractor has already disbanded the scheme. And then people approached him. It took like 2 years for Vatu to convince people to negotiate with the government. And the real work actually started somewhere around 2014, 13, I think. And then and it started when I studied this model in detail. I did a survey, I met people, local people. And so I went there in 2016. I've been visiting it before even operationalization, but in 2016, it was almost fully functional. So that's how it took some time. And because it was difficult for them to build on the existing system, because the existing system, there were no, maps available. There were no database, no quality of standards available, no standards available that they deployed in those infrastructure. So that person actually, and that's not the unique case in Balwal actually. That's what it happens in almost every water project actually. So there is no proper documentation in any scheme. If today you want to find out, that's why even in big cities, when it often happens that you are building a new road and now you are digging everything and you are just trying to find out where are telco lines, where are these electricity lines, and this happens because we don't document things properly. So there were no documentation, so it was really hard for them to build on the existing dilapidated sort of infrastructure. And they also faced a lot of problems even after the operationalization, because these pipes were of not good quality, and every next day there will be a problem in one of the pipes, and then they'll have to fix it. So it took longer actually for them to maintain, operate that system.
So because these existing systems, they're not documented, they're not recorded, why does it make more sense to restore these schemes instead of just replacing them? You mentioned that there's less appetite for that. How come?
So there is this mindset in our government departments, and that mindset is starting a new project. Or every year when budget is announced, they want to announce that we have started this many new schemes. you know and even for people, it's important a new scheme is coming into their neighborhood. So then people are happy, this new scheme is coming to our neighborhood. But what's happening with the existing schemes, no one worries about it. And once people are, already they've got that scheme, it's running, in a way that's not up to the mark. uh, and sometimes they won't, they won't be able to lobby for that, sort of upgradation of that scheme, because in every what we call ADP, annual development plans, and PSDP, you'll see that there is a huge throw forward actually. The throw forward is that even if I started last year a project of say 5 billion, and I committed that I'll allocate 1 billion last year, but I actually did not allocated spent 1 billion. I only released maybe like 500 million. And now this project got extended for another 5 years, with all these sort of shortage of releases. But then every year I'll start a new project. And I'll also, because as a politician, I also want to announce in the assembly that, the new ADP is 1,000 billion or, 200 billion. And I have started 100 new water projects. But what is happening with existing water projects? No one is concerned about that. So everyone wants to have a new project.
Dr. Naveed, I just want to ask a short question, because you are right. There are compulsions in announcing new projects. For the contractors and people in the bureaucracy, unfortunately, they see an opportunity for taking cuts from this project. Repairing the old project, it demands so much hard work, and especially engaging the community. They don't have expertise in that. So this is more motivating. This is the compulsion to get the cuts and to get more votes announced that you have done. But why communities don't respond to this? What is the compulsion missing on community side?
So the compulsion, once I read somewhere that democratization doesn't mean, having elections actually. Democratization means that how elected representatives are now consulting with their constituents for decision making. So what happens, because in Pakistan there is a real issue in democratization, and the real issue is lack of local governments. It's easier for people to hold accountable local government officials as compared to holding an MPA or MNA accountable. So, that connection, even if we want to go for participatory development around the world, we have seen this phenomenon. Wherever there are local governments more empowered, people are more likely to collaborate with them. People are more likely to hold them accountable. It's really difficult for them, like sitting in someone in Balwal and go to, because now in this centralized system, decisions are made in Lahore. In the
Yes.
case of Punjab, in case of, Ladkana, the decisions will be made in Karachi. So for those people to go to Karachi, negotiate with them, doesn't make sense, and it's not a feasible scenario. So the
It
real
sends a
issue is
powerlessness. They think that they don't have any.
powerlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When these because there are no local governments, then currently these social entrepreneurs are playing that role of bridging, the gap between the decision makers and the people. So these professionals, ideally, the professionals should be there, but the local governments, empowered local governments, they even in Pakistan, the water pricing, particularly these decisions are made by the chief ministers of a province. So when people cannot talk to the chief minister, but they can actually talk to the local councillor of their street or mohalla. So that's
Yeah.
where I think in Pakistan that democratization hasn't happened or participatory development hasn't happened. The major reason is the lack of local governments.
Lack of devolution of administrative fiscal authority. Yeah. And
Yeah,
political
yeah,
authority. All
yeah.
right.
Okay, I have a broader question here, just in terms of broader development. Now, we do have these social entrepreneurs like Nazir Bhattu, who's doing, great work for the community. He's making the community better. Why don't we elect such people as leaders of local governments? Why don't people promote these individuals to go higher up in positions in order to create a more, even philanthropists in government, for example, is my question. Why don't we have that system in place? And that's totally up to the people, like people can recognize who they want their leaders to be.
Yeah, I think the issue is much more severe here. The issue is we don't have local governments and we don't let local governments perform, And if that has been happening continuously, then there must have been some refinement where people could see that who is really delivering and who is not delivering. In General Musharraf time, there may be some issues in that devolution system, but still, if we see in the history of Pakistan, that was relatively much better devolution system. So in that system, we saw many new faces, coming up. We saw many new faces emerging who delivered in their cities, and then they also, sort of got higher positions later as MNAs and. Even the last chief minister of PTI government was actually a Tahsil Nazim, Mr. Buzdar. That's his fame. So what I want to say that we really observed that emergence of new leaders when these local governments were functioning. But because local governments are not functioning and they come after a long intervals and gaps, then money matters more, connections matter more. People don't know because last time there was no local government, so there is no concept of votes based on performance because there was no performance. So there was no local government, so hence they cannot be held accountable. So every time there will be a new sibling of a powerful politician. So that happens.
So devolution is a missing link
Yeah,
in democratic and participatory governance in Pakistan.
true.
Okay, I think we just addressed a key development issue, I think, throughout our interviews by addressing devolution. Anyway, we're gonna go back to the model. I have a question about funding. Approximately how much money went into this? How much were you able to raise per household? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I'm not recalling the total amount that the project was worth in, but at that time in 2016, every household had to pay like something around 4,000 rupees, Pakistani rupees, and those 4,000 rupees included water meter cost as well as internal development costs, and so that was the amount that every household paid. That's the first financing source from the community. And even, people are not very rich in that area. And 4,000 wasn't an easier amount. The government can't collect even 300 rupees from them. So that was a huge, social mobilization success by Nazir Bhattu. The second thing was actually charging people water charges according to their consumption. So because what has been happening in Pakistan, we have a flat rate of water meters. And usually that flat rate is determined by the plot size or the lot size. Like how much, is it 5 marla, is it 10 marla, is it 1 canal? So according to that, then the water bills are issued. So in some cases, I went to one of the households and they told me that, since we have this Nazir Bhattu scheme, our bill has, gone so high, and this is such a wrong scheme for us, and this man is actually looting us. And then I asked one of the employees of Nazir Bhattu, what's happened? They've told me that their bill is, it used to be like 600-700, but now it is like 2,000 rupees. And they told me actually they are three brothers. All of three have like 5 to 6 kids. And in this small house, they are living like, 25 people. So that's their water consumption. So because earlier, because it was only a 5 marla home, and they were being charged like, and even that they were not paying, it was like 300 rupees. But it was according to the lot size. So that's where the financing comes in. And that also what I observed actually, I think about 60 to 70% water efficiency improved after water meter installation. So this is also a huge achievement as we are going through climate change, water scarcity, and all these aspects that we are facing. Having this efficiency of water use is so important. And so that's another achievement of this project is changing the consumer behavior. Financing happens through whatever part, about 70% was financed by the government, about 30%, 20 to 30 somewhere, and that amount was financed by the local people.
Now I have a technical question here. So when they were collecting money, how were they able to do this? Did you have a member of team go and collect cash? Was there a community bank account? I'm just wondering how that worked.
So they have a bank account. So they issue a challan, like any other utilities they do in Pakistan, and then they have to deposit that amount in the bank, and then after that they have to, show it to the local, person, and they also hire the local people for all that surveillance, for collection, for repair and maintenance, and the communities know that who is the person who is in charge of our mohalla or street or a neighborhood. So then they can reach out to them if there is any issue that they are facing. It happens in Pakistan, suppose, a government utility, they are providing water and there were some issues in tube well, and it wasn't functioning due to some, electric shocks or some other issues or maintenance, or motor got, the motor got disconnected from the main system, and then all of a sudden everything collapsed. Many things happen with these motors and tube wells. And then the government has to do the procurement, and usually the government does not have petty cash, and there are always, long, lengthy processes, bureaucratic procedures to get the money for these repairs and maintenance. So in this case, they have money in their account and they go and they fix it, they repair it. So that's such a smooth process as compared to the government spending that money through its routine, public financial management system.
So it is what is happening here is that government has agreed to have Anjuman Samaji Behbood, Vattu's organization, as a subcontractor to perform these services and getting out of the rigmarole of the bureaucratic hurdles. And second is that they also provided Anjuman Samaji Behbood an office in the town government's building, right? So that they get that symbol of authority that they are working with the government. And so they represent that authority, and then combining it with their influence, they're able to collect the money and manage that and
Yeah, that's important. I visited
Yeah.
that office as well in the Tahsil Municipal Administration Office. And yes, the government has, that arrangement of outsourcing with Anjuman Samaji Behbood. And this is important to share with you that at that time, there were 3 or 4 union councils in Bilwal. And this Changa Pani model was implemented in one of the UCs. And it is important to mention that all other UCs are still not having water supply, decent water supply, despite the government repeated efforts. And sometimes they started a project, then it got disbanded, and sometimes they did everything, but it worked for some time, but water quality is not good. And no, the politicians initially, when Nazir Vattu goes to any community, the politicians think that this is actually threat to their constituency, because people will think that Vattu is entering and he is resolving their problem, not the politician. But after some time, politicians actually realize that this is good for their constituency. And the politicians will then say to him that, okay, Nazir Vattu, you come to our locality as well. And then they also do such speeches that I'll bring Nazir Vattu in our union council for the supply of water. So, even that politician who was opposing him to bring that water even in one union councils, now he wants to run elections based on the promise that he will bring Nazir Vattu in this union council to provide you clean drinking water. So that's also one success to Wales.
I want to mention an anecdote. I think the greatest success Vattu had is building trust with the community, with the government, with the politicians, and a beautiful story. Vattu showed me a video where the member of National Assembly is making a speech against Vattu. That Vattu is a liar, he is a thief, he is this, he is that. And I asked Vattu, Saab, who made this video? Making speech against you. He said, I was making this video. I said, where were you standing? He said, I was standing in front of him. So Vattu, he enjoyed so much trust among the community and him. He didn't feel threatened sitting in front of the politician making a speech against him. And, that is again, I said, how come this happened? He said, Akhtar Hamid Khan taught me humility. That don't be arrogant. Listen to people who are opposed to you. And I think that was his greatest success. But was other limitations. But for building trust, the most important thing is humility.
I think it's a good idea to end it here. I think we've uncovered a lot of good information and we've covered the social business and tech model. So I think we can conclude it here. Thank you so much for sharing all this information. It was really
amazing
to talk to you, and it was so informative. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. And I learned a lot from this, podcast from Fayaz Saab's ideas, especially, the things that he shared, the golden words of Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan Saab.
Yeah. Very simple, but very profound.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.